This is the review for the unit on triangle basics, so make sure you have the correct review. This review is in two parts, and so this part is review part one. If you already have both parts, you'll just need to listen to two videos, but make sure that you have the review part one. The first set of questions is they want names. They want the words. We want what it is. And number one says a figure formed by the segments determined by three non-collinear points, and those segments will form a triangle. Remember, non-collinear, not on the same line. So if I have 3 points not on the same line, I form a triangle. Number two, a triangle with no two sides congruent. So I'm naming this by the sides. If no two sides are congruent, it means all three are different, and that is a scalene triangle. You kind of have two sets of words, one for sides and one for angles, and you kind of have to keep them separate. A triangle that has at least two sides congruent, and if at least two sides are congruent, it is an isosceles. I kind of always remember SOS in the middle there, two S's, at least two sides are congruent. A triangle where all sides are congruent, and that is an equilateral. All three sides are congruent, equilateral. Triangle in which all of the angles are acute. Now we've moved to we're going to name it by angles, and if every angle is acute, then we have an acute triangle. Now here's the thing about triangles. There's three angles. Two of them will always be acute. It's that third angle that we're looking at. If it has one obtuse angle, then it is an obtuse triangle. The other two angles will be acute, but it's that other angle. It has one right angle, and usually how we know? There's that box in the corner. That is a right triangle. And if all angles are congruent, it is an acute triangle, but we have a more specific name. Because if it is all the angles are congruent, they all end up being 60 degrees, all three are 60, we have a more specific name, and it's equiangular. Now the next three problems say, decide if you can even form a triangle. If I had 3 straws or 3 sticks that had the measurements of 8, 10, and 20, could I put them together, and could I even make a triangle? We learned the rule for that. And what you have to do is you have to add the two shorter sides together. So you got to identify those. The two shorter sides here are 8 and 10. Now folks, it won't always be the first and the second one, but you add those two together first. You compare it to the longest side. Now remember, the two shorter must come first, and the longest must be on the right side. 18 is what compared to 20? Well, it is less than. If you get less than, you do not have a triangle. You could not get 3 sticks in the lengths of 8, 10, and 20 to form a triangle. So now I look at the next one. Find the two shorter sides, 10 and 11. Add them together, 21. Compare it to the longest side, 14. It must go on the right. This time, 21 is greater than 14. So since it is greater than 14, we can form a triangle. And so, yes, we have a triangle. What kind is it? Well, look at your numbers for your sides. All three sides are different. If all three sides have a different measure, it is a scalene triangle. And now you look at the last one. Remember, you're looking for the two shorter sides. You must add those first. Well, they're all three the same, so 10 and 10 would be the two shorter sides. That's 20. Compare it to the longest side, which is 10. 20 is greater than 10. Since it is greater than, yes, it is a triangle. Now, when you go back and look, you're going to name it by sides. All three sides are the same, so if I'm going to name it by sides, that is called an equilateral triangle. Now, one thing you've got to do is you've got to read very carefully on your directions, okay? So my directions at the top say, the measures of two angles of a triangle are given. Find the measure of the third angle. So that's the first thing we want to do. Then classify by angles. Folks, just a second ago we were classifying by sides. So you got to change your thinking. We want to classify by angles. All right, the rule we know is that the three angles of a triangle always add up to 180. So I want to add these two together. 57 and 33 is 90 degrees. I know that the three angles add up to 180. So if I'll take 180 and subtract the two angles that were given to me, then I know the third angle must be 90 degrees. Well, that's a right angle. So if I have a right angle as one of my three angles, then I have a right triangle because we name it by that third angle. So I'm going to do the same thing in number 13. I need to add together the two angles that I am given. And I get 88. The three angles of a triangle add up to 180. 180 minus 88 is 92. So the third angle is 92 degrees. Now it wanted the measure of the third angle, so be sure that you put the degree sign on that one. Now I must name it. Remember, when I'm naming it by angles, you're looking for the third one. This is acute, that's acute, but this angle is greater than 90, so we have an obtuse triangle because we have an obtuse angle. And once again, I need to add in problem 14 the two angles that I know. They add up to 100. I just added those two together. The three angles of a triangle are 180. If you subtract the two that you know, that leaves you with the measure of the third angle. And since it's a measure, you put a degree sign. So what do I have? I have a 50 degree, that's acute, and a 50 degree. Well, two of your angles are always going to be acute. What's the third one? 80 degrees is also an acute angle, so this would be an acute triangle. All right, these three, it says find the specified values, which those what you want will be over here in the column on the left side, over here. So it wants X. Well, I look at this and I see that corner. That means that's a 90-degree angle. I have a right triangle. If that angle is 90, I know the three angles of a triangle add up to 180, so those two added together also have to equal 90, because 90 plus 90 is 180. So I can write an algebra equation. X plus 21 should equal 90. Draw your line, practice your good algebra skills, subtract 21 from both sides, and X equals 69. In this case, it wants me to find X, so X is 69. As an angle, it would be 69 degrees. I look at the next picture and I think, what's the rule they want me to figure out? Well, it has given me all three angles of the triangle. What's the rule I know about all three angles? All three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So if I would go add this, plus that, they'll all add up. So I'm going to add 2x plus how many x's is that? Remember, if you have a single x, that's like a 1. So 2x plus 1x plus 1x gives me 4 x's. I could add those together because they were like terms. They all had an x for their variable. Now I'm going to solve. This is a one-step equation. All I need to do is to get rid of times 4 by dividing by 4, and x equals 45. Now I have to look at the equation and see what it wants. Well, the first thing it wants is x, so x is 45. Then it wants me to find the measure of angle E. Angle E is 2x, so 2 times 45 is 90. So the measure of angle E is 90 degrees. Don't forget your degree symbol because it wants a measure. And then last but not least, this is kind of the rule that we learned on the last day of this unit. And the picture looks a little bit different because what you have is you have three angles of a triangle here, and I'm marking them all in blue. They're the interior angles. But then this angle right out here is marked. It's an exterior. It's on the outside. And we learned that an exterior angle equals the sum of the two remote interior angles. And so what does remote mean? We talked a lot about that in class, that if you had a remote control car, what does it mean? You can control that car from far away. So remote means it's the two angles that are not next to. Well, the angle that's next to this 80 degrees is this angle because they're adjacent and they form a linear pair. So it is these two red angles, angle A and angle C, that are the two remote interior. And if you add these two together, they will equal the exterior angle. So they're going to equal 80. Well, remember that's a 1x, because that's like a coefficient of 1, plus 2x, so that gives me 3x, minus 4, and it should equal that exterior angle is 80. So now it's just a matter of solving an algebra equation. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And when you're doing this, use your good algebra skills. Don't start cutting corners and leaving steps out. 3x equals 84. Divide by 3, and x equals 28. Now, it wants x, so I put the 28 there, but then it wants me to find the measure of angle C, right there. So that's 2x times 28 minus 4. Order of operations, multiply first, you get 56 minus 4. The measure of angle C is 52 degrees. Then it wants the measure of angle ABC. Now that's the other part of this. Do you know you didn't even have to solve that problem if you didn't want to? Because remember how I told you together these two angles are a linear pair? So if this part is 80, this part has to be 100 because they have to add up to 180. So the measure of angle ABC, this one right there, is 100 degrees. So let's read problem number 20. In triangle ABC, AB is 6, BC is 8, and AC is 12. List the angles of ABC in order from largest to smallest. Folks, the first thing you have to do is draw a picture. When you don't see one, none of this is going to make sense, and you're just going to get all these numbers mixed up in your head. So you must draw triangle ABC. Next, label it, mark it, whatever needs to be done. AB is 6, the length is 6. BC is 8. AC is 12. Now everything is starting to come to life. It's going to have more meaning. List the angles of triangle ABC in order from largest to smallest. Well, we learned in class that the largest angle, which is what we want first, is across from the longest side. So here's the longest side. Draw your arrow. What angle is across from the longest side? Angle B. So it comes first. Check, we've done B. What's the next longest side? A. So the next largest angle will be across from 8, which is angle A. And then finally, the shortest side, which is 6, will come last because smallest is last. And across from the smallest side, the shortest side is the smallest angle, which is angle C. Now when you get to number 21, you're pretty much kind of doing the same thing. We have triangle XYZ. You can't even begin to know what's happening in the problem until you draw a picture. XYZ. When I'm looking for work on your homework and assignments and review, if you don't have the picture drawn and the diagram labeled, you're not going to get credit for that. So be sure you show your work. The measure of angle X, that's this angle, is 103 degrees. The measure of angle Y, that's this angle, is 41 degrees. And the measure of angle Z, that's this angle, is 36 degrees. Now I've got something that's starting to make sense. This time list the sides in order from shortest to longest. Well, just like we did the smallest side, across from the smallest angle will be the shortest side. So the smallest angle is 36. It's this one. Across from it is side XY. Be sure to put a bar up across it for your correct labeling. The next smallest angle is 41. So what side is across from it? Draw your arrow. It's side XZ. And finally, the largest angle, if you go across, will be the longest side, which is YZ. And I have listed them in order from shortest to longest. When I look at number 22, it says find the measure of angle R in the picture. But I also make a little bit more of an understanding because I'm looking at this picture and I see that these two sides are congruent. That means I have an isosceles triangle. And in an isosceles triangle, if those two legs are congruent, the angles across from them are congruent. They're called the base angles. And so this angle, angle R, and this angle, angle Q, are congruent. Well, I know angle R is 5x minus 17. Now that arrow's off a little bit. It should be right there. Angle Q is 2x plus 10. So there I have my algebra equation because the two angles are congruent. So I can say 5x minus 17 equals 2x plus 10. The base angles are congruent. I'm going to move my letters to the left by subtracting 2x. If my letters go to the left, my numbers need to go to the other side. I get rid of minus 17 by adding 17. Cancel, cancel. 5x minus 2x is 3x. 10 plus 17 is 27. When a number's next to a letter, it means multiply, so we get rid of multiplication by dividing, and x equals 9. Does it want x? No, you've got to go read. Find the measure of angle R. Angle R is that. So I need to plug in a 9 for x. 5 times 9 minus 17. So 5 times 9 is 45. You always multiply before you subtract. 45 minus 17 is 28. So the measure of angle R is going to be 28 degrees because it's the measure of an angle. And then it says find the measure of angle P in that same picture. Now let's think about it. If this angle is 28 degrees, then guess what? So is this one, because remember the base angles are congruent. So all I'm left with is P. Well, we know the three angles of a triangle add up to 180. So if you would add 28 and 28 together, you get 56. That's those two angles. 180 minus 56 is 124. So angle P is 124 degrees. And it's like each new problem is a new puzzle, so you've got to read, okay, and find out what's going on. When I look at this picture, I kind of survey what I have first before I just jump in and start doing things. I see tick marks on all three sides. That means all three sides are congruent. If all three sides are congruent, folks, all three angles are congruent. And that's called, do you remember, an equiangular triangle. And since the three angles of a triangle equal 180, if you divide it into thirds, when you have an equiangular triangle, every one of those angles is 60 degrees. So 4x minus 20 equals 60. I'm going to add 20 to both sides. 4x equals 80, and I'm going to divide by 4, and x is 20. Now, does it want x? This time, yes, it does. It says find the value of x, so x is 20. That's why you always have to end up going back to the problem and seeing what it wants. Number 25. I can look at 25 before I read a word and say, there's no picture. I will be drawing a picture. The vertex angle of an isosceles triangle. What do you know about isosceles? Two of the sides are congruent. Measures a plus 15. And one of the base angles is 7a. Find each angle measure. So let's make us a triangle here. It's isosceles. These two sides are congruent. Then we know the base angles are congruent. Now it tells me that the vertex angle, that's the one that's all by itself up here, is a plus 15. And it tells me the base angle is 7a. Well, if one of them is 7a, the other is 7a because the base angles are congruent. Remember, and I should have put two little marks there, that one is different. The vertex angle is different. I had a different color, but I should have marked it with a different marking. So now I have my angles. What do we know about the three angles of a triangle? They add up to 180. So, remember that's 1a. 1a, 7a, and 7a is 15a plus 15 equals 180. Subtract 15 from both sides. 15a equals 165. Divide both sides by 15. And notice I don't ever cut corners when I'm solving my equations. And that goes 11 times. So a is 11. It doesn't want me to find a. It says find each angle measure. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take that 11 and plug it in. So 7 times 11 is 77 degrees. Well, remember, that's two of the angles because that's the base angles. And now I take the 11 and plug it in there. 11 plus 15 is 26 degrees. Then we worked kind of on the fourth day in this unit on special segments in a triangle. And the thing you've got to do is a lot of people are not taking the words and marking what it means on the picture, so you have to. So when it tells me in number 26 that AD is a median, that means the median goes from a vertex to the middle of the other side. So it cuts that into two equal portions. Mark it. That's what a median does. Then it says BD is 5x minus 1. You've got to put your work down. You've got to draw what's happening. CD is 4x plus 7. AC is 2x minus 3. But now all of that writing is making sense. And it wants me to find the length of BC. But I'm not going to find the length of BC till I solve for x. And so by looking at the picture, I go, ooh, these two pieces are congruent. Now, when I set up my algebra equation, I'm going to put 5x minus 1 on the left, and I'm going to put 4x plus 7 on the right, because I want my larger x on the left. I like to move my letters to the left. So I'm going to move that 4x by subtracting 4x. I'm going to move that minus 1 by adding 1. Cancel, cancel. 5x minus 4x is 1x, and 7 plus 1 is 8. So x is 8. Now, it wants the length of this whole segment. But if I can find a part of it, I know that'll be the same, and I can add them together. So I'm going to plug in an 8 right here. 5 times 8 minus 1, that is 40 minus 1, that's 39. So if this piece is 39, that piece is 39, and 39 plus 39 is 78. So the length of BC is 78. It's not an angle, so I don't put a degree mark. Number 27 says BD is an altitude. What is an altitude? It is a distance, the height of something. And the height of something we measure perpendicularly. So BD is an altitude, that forms a right angle. If that's a right angle, so is that. Mark your picture first. What does the word mean? Go mark the picture. Find the value of x if angle ADB is 4x minus 10. Well, let's outline ADB. AD, well, I got off there. It's that angle right there, which is a right angle. So I know that 4x minus 10 equals 90 degrees. Now I'm going to solve that algebra equation. I need to add 10 to both sides. 4x equals 100. I'm going to divide by 4. X is 25. Does it want x? Yes, this time it does. X is 25. Number 28 starts out with a picture, but the most important piece of information here is you have an isosceles triangle. What do you know about an isosceles? These two sides are congruent, therefore those two angles are congruent. It tells me the vertex angle was C, so that's how I knew A and B were the base angles, and it has an altitude of CD. Well, an altitude says that this is a right angle. So we know right away that angles 3 and 4 are 90-degree angles. Once you know one of your special segments and you have an isosceles triangle, guess what else? You know two other things. You know that it's also a median. So that side, that piece is congruent to that piece. AD is congruent to BD. And then you know that these two angles are also congruent. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So it says find the measure of angle 2 if the measure of angle 1, so angle 1 is 2x plus 5, and angle 2 is 3x minus 7. So because I marked the picture, I know those two angles are congruent, so I can set up an algebra equation. Always put your larger variable on the left if you have a choice. So 3x minus 7 equals 2x plus 5. I'm going to move my letters to the left, so I'm going to move that 2x by subtracting 2x, and I'm going to move that minus 7 by adding 7. That leaves me with x equals 12. Now it doesn't want x, it wants me to find the measure of angle 2. So I need to take that 12 and plug it in right there. So 3 times 12, you always multiply first, is 36. 36 minus 7 is 29, and it's the measure of an angle, so it's in degrees. Now I've got some markings on my picture in number 29, and it says the measure of ABD. Well, that's this little angle right there is 16 degrees. Find the measure of angle ABC. So it wants me to find the whole big angle. And I wanted that in blue. There you go. Well, if that piece right there is 16, then that piece is 16, because if it is a median, it's also an angle bisector. So 16 plus 16 is 32 degrees. Number 30. Once again, we're dealing with isosceles congruent triangles here. The two triangles are congruent is what we're dealing with. Because see, if we've got a right angle here and we've got a median, then guess what else we know? We know then that this angle is congruent to that angle. So we know a lot of different things. We also know then that this piece is congruent to that piece. So the measure of angle ABD, that's that green angle right there, is 2x plus 12. And CBD, that's the one over here, is 6x minus 18. What do I know those two angles are? They're congruent, so I can set them equal to each other. Now I can solve for x, and it's x that I'm going to use to finish this problem. So I'm going to move my letters to the left by subtracting 2x. I'm going to move my numbers to the right. I get rid of a minus 18 by adding 18. Cancel, cancel. I have 4x equals 30. Divide by 4. Now this one is not going to come out evenly when you divide it. You know, if you get a crazy decimal, then you might want to double check your work. But we'll do things that end in a half, so you get 7.5 or 7.5. It wants me to find the measure of ABC. That's the whole thing. Well, I need to plug it in there first. So I need 2 times 7.5 plus 12. Always multiply first, order of operations. So 7.5 times 2 is 15. 15 plus 12 is 27. If this angle is 27, so is that. Together they form angle ABC. 27 plus 27 is 54 degrees. And I found the measure of angle ABC. Always check your words to make sure you found what they wanted. 31. Given that FH is the perpendicular bisector. So they have shown that it's perpendicular, but bisect means it cuts it into two equal pieces also. So mark your picture. E to F is 4y minus 3. That's this side. F to G is 6y minus 37. Well, if you know you have the perpendicular bisector and it goes from a vertex, then you also know you have an angle bisector. And now you know I'm dealing with an isosceles triangle. So those two sides are congruent. So 6y minus 37 equals 4y minus 3. Move your letters to the left by subtracting 4y. Move your numbers to the right by adding 37. 2y equals 34. You get rid of times 2 by dividing by 2, and y is 17. Now it wants me to find FG. So I got to take that y and plug it into FG. So 6 times 17, you always multiply first, then we will subtract. So 6 times 17 is 102. 102 minus 37 is 65. So the length of FG is 65, and that would be units. And then number 32. Given that E to F is 10.6, so E to F is 10.6, and F to G is 10.6. Aha, what do you know? It's isosceles. If it's isosceles, the base angles are congruent. If it's an altitude, which it is, then we also know that it's a median, and it is an angle bisector. So we know a whole lot of things now once we saw that it was isosceles. It wants us to find EG. We do know FH is the perpendicular bisector of EG. Now, it does tell me that E to H is 4.3. I kind of missed that, didn't I? Well, if that's 4.3, this one's 4.3, and I know that because it was isosceles. So EG is the whole way. 4.3 plus 4.3 is 8.6.